The What Your Next podcast helps you build a TBR of each your favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show. Hi, Avery. Welcome to What Your Next podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm so excited to be here.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a writer, an author now, and an editor. I worked for years in media at The Skim specifically, and I wrote a nonfiction book with them. And I've always wanted to write my own novel. And that novel that I started in 2019 is coming out on May 23rd. And I'm so excited for the world to read it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So let's talk about social engagement. What was the source of inspiration? Like, what led you to write this novel? Why this one? Because you may have started in 2019, but you probably have spent quality time with it during the pandemic, I'm assuming.
Definitely. And this is not my first attempt at writing a book. Like most authors that I know, I have half a book in a drawer. And this book really was sparked by my social calendar. I was going to a lot of weddings, and then COVID happened and all of that grinded to a complete halt. So what was initially conceived as a fun and frothy exploration of wedding culture got a lot darker during COVID, which I think made the book more interesting and better, but it definitely took some turns that I wasn't anticipating, which is one of my favorite parts about writing.
Oh my gosh. I love the fact that you took some of the real life, what happened, wedding culture came to a halt, and it's $1 billion, I don't know how much money, but it's a large business,
Yes.
Industry. And it's like, it went on a hold, in 2020 when there was nothing. And then we were like, okay, but we can make them spec-your weddings, or we can make them little things, or Zoom weddings, or,
Yes. It was all, people were trying to get creative for sure. And I think there was an element of escapism too when I was writing the book, because I couldn't be social. I couldn't do social things. So it was fun to be able to do that through writing. And then also to explore, to really get into the interiority of this character who was feeling really claustrophobic about her own identity and her relationship, and kind of dig deep in that first person mindset too.
Yeah, I love this. And so talk to us about social engagement. What is the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch for social engagement is that it's about a bride whose marriage implodes on the night of her wedding. So she has this disastrous breakup, and she's in the honeymoon suite with a box of pizza, scrolling through her phone, and she looks at the photographic evidence on her phone, so her Instagram feed and her camera roll, to piece together what went wrong in this relationship. There is a lot of fraught family dynamics, class dynamics, some toxic ex-boyfriends, and the one that got away. It has some intrigue and mystery baked into this sort of fun seeming premise.
I love this premise because I feel like it's something that we have gone through, especially when we go through a breakup. We go back to our camera roll and to see what happened. We do a postmortem of where did it start? I'm one of those introspective people who be like, I have a problem. I go back and I dig into it, chew the problem so much to figure out what is the root cause,
Yes.
I go to my therapist and tell her this is a root cause of what's happening.
Completely. And I love that word that you use, postmortem, because it really is like a death, even though the person is still alive usually. And it feels like sort of a ghost that you have in your phone. And I really have been fascinated for a while by, you might remember a few years ago, Time Hop was a big thing. It was an app that sort of showed what you were doing 2 years ago and then 5 years ago. And now our iPhones do that for us. So even if you do want to forget certain things, you can't really. We're kind of prisoners of our past with our phones. And yeah, I found it really interesting that this technological device that's ostensibly supposed to move us forward keeps pulling us towards our past in a way that's, can be destructive in some ways.
Yeah, I can tell you. I think Google, I have an Android phone, and Google, it does the same thing. Google, if you go to Google Photos, they have at least in Android, they have all the Google Photos of what's happening, all the stuff. And it will actually do slideshows of things that you were 5 years ago. And it will take themes. So it'll be you were outside of your house 10 times over the
Yeah.
20 years. You're like,
It's like summers. Yeah, exactly.
summers, or like food. You ate these things. Here's each photograph. You know? And it's like,
It is really funny. But I did notice recently that you can, and this might be obvious to most people, this might be something people have known about all along. You can say, don't include this person or don't show me pictures of this person, like on a photo. Yeah, yeah. So good hot tip. There's some setting that you can click for that.
That is a good hot tip, but that's, you have to think about it along with blocking the person and like
totally. It's so many steps. And what for? I mean, I think that we become sort of almost digital hoarders in some ways. I definitely don't delete pictures off my camera roll as much as I should. I have so many random screenshots or, videos of concerts or like a little, just little things that I'm never going to look back at. Yeah. And yeah, they're all there.
They're all there. They're all, and like right now, all my stuff is in Google Photos. So it's like, I can look back and I'm like, I can search and I can like have like a outlook and I'm like, yeah, I didn't remember half of this stuff, but it's there.
Yes. Yes.
So,
it's fascinating. And I think, the book definitely explores that, how you can have like a retrospective. And for Kelly, my main character, it's really a retrospective of her past year. So you start to understand, I mean, of course, a lot of these relationships go way deeper than just a year. And there are some flashbacks to her college years and before, but you start to understand why this relationship blew up on the night of her wedding through all of these events that led up to it.
So what was the process of writing backwards? Because essentially you're going from like we know what happens at the end, and then you go like, okay, but we got to dig in here and dig in here and dig in here. Was it a process like, did you plot it out or was you uncovering as you were like going each day or each timeline like, hey, this needs to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. It changed a lot. So I think I always have really liked that structure of starting at the end or close to the end and then rewinding and finding out why you got there. Like, I mean, a classic recent example that we've all consumed is White Lotus. You know that there's a dead body, but you don't know how that happened. And I was in a writing workshop and someone in the workshop said, when I was workshopping this book, and someone said an excerpt from it, this is the closest that you can have to a dead body without there being a dead body on page 1. So it's a dead relationship, right? Yeah. Which I think also builds in the intrigue. So I liked that structure. And then in terms of then going back, I had an image that I knew I wanted to end on. Yeah. At the ultimate end. And because this book is so image-based, and there aren't actual images in the book, you have to imagine them. Yeah. But I felt like with each chapter, I kind of was imagining the image that you started with and then building out the image. So it's that Instagram versus reality commentary. But I think that there were beats that I knew I had to hit, but in general, I sort of let the characters dictate how they got to that ultimate final image.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about your reading life. What kind of books do you tend to read?
Yes. So I read fairly widely, but I really love upmarket fiction. I love books that have a really strong sense of voice. I like, books that are similar to social engagement, to be honest. I like books that are about usually written by women and about women, but that can shift. But yeah, I recently, well, I don't know if you want to ask me about my specific recommendations.
Let's talk about recommendations. Let's talk about those. Yeah.
Okay, great. So as I was thinking about like my top recommendations recently, I sort of realized that they all were circling this similar theme, which was like school girls and school age. And I think that's because I've been thinking about it a lot because I love books that are set on campuses, but it's more than that. I think that it's a time in your life, similar to when you're planning a wedding, honestly, where you revert to adolescence, like wedding planning, motherhood. There are these times in women's or just people's lives where we revert back to adolescence in some ways because we're unsure of who we are. We're trying to figure out this new phase. And so anyways, my books all kind of revolve around school. The first book that I want to recommend is Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance by Allison Espach. It is so beautifully written. It starts in elementary school with two sisters, and it tracks their infatuation with a local heartthrob, kind of like Sandlot vibes a little bit. But then a tragedy occurs and it leaves their lives forever intertwined with this boy. And it is really sad, but it's also really funny, which is hard to pull off, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine like pulling both, like all the emotions, but pulling those two conflicted emotions is, it's a hard to pull off.
Very, very. And I found myself laughing out loud and crying, which is
Yeah.
really rare to provoke both of those.
Yeah. Do you have any other recommendations?
Yeah. So my next one, Sirens and Muses by Antonia Angress. This is a book. It's the cover is beautiful. I've noticed a trend in covers recently with a lot of paintings on the cover, but this cover is the painting makes a lot of sense because it is about art school and it follows its multi-POV, which I also think can be hard to pull off. And it's about the budding art inspirations of these three characters, but it's also about a sort of friendship turned romance, potentially, not too much of a spoiler, but between two roommates. And it was just beautifully written. And I really felt like I knew the characters. Yeah. And then my next one, My Last Innocent Year by Daisy Alpert Florin, another painting cover, another gorgeous book inside the gorgeous cover. And this book is set at a school that's based on Dartmouth, where the author went in the 90s against the backdrop of the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. And it's sort of a Me Too book in some ways, but it's about consent, but it's also about female friendship. It has one of the richest, most evocative settings that I've read in a while. Like you really feel like you're on this college campus, which it's a fun immersion in that sense. And my next one is one that doesn't come out until June. So a little, teaser to add to your summer reading list. Madalena and the Dark by Julia Fine. And this is another extremely atmospheric setting, very different, going abroad to Venice in the 18th century. So it's historical fiction, takes place at a music school. It's another relationship between two young friends that might be something more. You're never quite sure. It kind of comments on how a lot of those really, really close female friendships can sort of edge into romantic territory without necessarily going there. But the music is amazing in it as well. You feel like you can hear the music.
Gosh, I love these recommendations and they're brand new to me, so I'm excited for them. I actually have to say the college to Dartmouth alike, 90s college vibes is probably the one that I'm most interested because I did go to college. I went in college in 99. So like in the
amazing.
And so there's probably there's a difference. There's something to be said about going to college before 2003, 2004, where there was no Facebook, there was no social media.
Definitely.
Very different. It's a very different experience.
For sure. And I think everything feels very grassroots. Like there are some protest movements on campus that some of the characters are involved in. And you see that, now you just post on Instagram and, you feel like you've done your part, but they were really on the ground and it was on the ground
and communication was you had to figure out how to communicate with one another. And
yes, definitely.
It's a very different, it's just different.
For sure. And I also think that the gray area of those, it centers on a teacher-student relationship. And the gray area of that was much less, or was much grayer, I guess. It wasn't people didn't have the language and the tools to talk about those abuses of power. Yeah.
No, we didn't thought it was abusive of power. We just thought that was how it's supposed to be.
Yes. It just...
it's we have sensibility of the 2023 after the post Me Too movement to see abuse of power and the power dynamics and relationships and stuff like that, age gaps and stuff. And the reality is that at that era, it was just oh, this is just how it happens. Women did not have that, did not have the rights or or the power to call out of bad behavior.
Completely. And now it's the alarm bells go off much earlier. Yeah, for sure. And then my last book recommendation is one, I'm curious if you've read this one, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado.
It's on my list.
Oh, it is incredible. And I know Her Body and Other Parties is also fantastic that she wrote, but this book blew me away. It's very much very unique. It's about an abusive relationship between two women, and it's very genre bending. It takes like different genre tropes. So it'll be like the romantic comedy, the historical fiction book, whatever it is, and it parses out their relationship through these different genres, which is, it's hard to explain. I feel like it's one that you just have to kind of open up and dive in.
Yeah, I am definitely adding that to my TBR, like queuing it up. Is just like, I heard great things about it. And I love the fact that it's like, you just have to better go blind, and abusive relationships is one of those topics. So it's a hot topic. And it's interesting to see how the author takes on that, that topic.
Completely. And this specifically is a same-sex relationship that's abusive. And she's talked about before how people think that men are usually the instigators of abuse, but and that, that there's sort of the cliche of the lesbian relationship as a utopia, but she kind of exposes how like abuse happens in any type of arrangement and can happen. Yeah.
It can happen. Both men and women can be abusive. Like, they might be abused and they might just become, the abusers. And it can be a cycle thing. So it's like, it's not just, just men as the abuser. It's like, I can tell you, like, it's not.
Completely. And she's one of those writers that I now will read anything she writes. I think she's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Avery, tell us where we can find you online.
So I'm on Instagram at Avery Carpenter Forrey, and I'm on Twitter at Avery C. Forrey. Come check it out because, my book's about social media. So I am active on Instagram specifically. I'm more active on.
I love this. Thank you, Avery, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other book recommendations, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Thank you so much for listening and happy reading.